What's up, everyone? This is Andre from Indie Arts Midwest, and in this video, I'm going to review Generation Zero. Now, what you're seeing on the screen is a old recording, which I have been waiting to release since, I don't know, a year after the game was released, I'd say. But yet another lost file on my computer, so here we are. So the original purpose of these recordings wasn't necessarily to just capture cool stuff. It was originally a form of me to show off some of the glitches, which I titled Glitch Hunts after a while because the game was still in early stages and essentially there's a lot going on to the point where you'd run into little issues where you'd get stuck or just little tiny things that were sometimes comical to see ooh, or experience, but either way at other times also annoying. So it's still going to be a review, but just keep in mind that some of the things that you see will be just goofy stuff that happened, and also some, a few cool things here and there. I will also say that I got this on sale on the PlayStation Store. I believe it was like $12 to $14 at the time. It's like in January. And the reason why I purchased this game was because I saw my brother and his friend playing online. And at that moment, they just so happened to be battling a tank. And I'm like, what the hell is this? So, he explains it to me. I get the game a little while later. At this time, I guess they moved on from the game. I'm not entirely sure, but essentially, I buy the game in hopes of playing it on multiplayer, and ended up playing alone for a pretty large amount of time. So, you'll notice that a lot of this is just me running around by myself. And as anyone who's played this game for a lengthy period of time knows, that ammo can get kind of scarce. I will say that when I finally did get an online session in with some people that I knew, because the first original session that I had, the person just backed out of nowhere, and so I just never played online with anyone else after that, unless it was somebody that was on my friends list, essentially, because I just didn't want to deal with the possibility of a random occurrence like that. So, but I will say that when I finally did get an online experience in, it kind of takes away the fear of the bots because you realize their movement patterns. And I'm not particularly one who is I'm more of a casual gamer, I'll say. So I'll play after work and stuff like that. I don't have extreme amounts of time to play these kinds of games, so it takes me a little longer to acclimate to what's going on. Playing online just kind of helps you get a lot braver about running from or attacking them. You get to figure out real quickly how they're taken down, because for the most part, I was just kind of guerrilla warfaring it as far as just, doing pop shots to take out a few here and there, run to the next location, rinse and repeat. But when you get better guns, of course, throughout the game, you'll then find that it's easier to just kind of go in and tank it in some scenarios, depending on, where you're aiming, of course, because that's also that's always going to be a factor. And I appreciate that aspect about the game in terms of aiming in the right spot to take them down in a quicker fashion, that might determine what kind of items they dropped. I really appreciated that. One thing I was not suspecting, and I know many new players don't either, is the fact that there are no NPCs that you interact with. Now, I know that in the DLCs, or at least that's from what I hear, there in the DLCs, there are some form of NPC interaction. But I'm just speaking on a regular level like this. Some of the places that you would go to I understand that there's a chance that many of them were taken over, but I just think that the NPCs could have been integrated into this on the base level, and it would have worked fantastically. Especially since, and this is more towards. I understand that that's kind of the loneliness, but I understand the loneliness they're trying to create. But my concern is that for players like myself who are casual, it is nice to come across an NPC, especially if you've been playing alone for a long time and you're just reading documents and it's like, okay, this is cool. The tapes are cool. Finding all the little trinkets and stuff is also okay. I get that there are plenty of locations that are like above ground where they could have easily been overtaken. And based on how the enemy bots spawn, and we'll get to that spawning thing later, could realistically, yeah, I mean, like, do I think that a family could not beat a bunch of ticks? I doubt it. There's going to be something in a melee format that would work, and I'm so glad they factor that in. We'll talk about that later. But just for the sense of having the NPCs around in some format would be great. One thing I didn't like in particular was the fact that when you're inside of a bunker and there's something above ground, like directly above you, it could hear you. And that just never made sense to me. You're literally separated by layers and layers of concrete and earth, you know, so there's no way that they could hear you. So I just hope that by now that particular type of glitch is taken out. I'm calling it a glitch because it's just not a realistic. I guess we'll say it's a bug. It's not a glitch. Yeah, yeah. That particular bug is just one that I was not fond of, and that's one I experienced early on in the game. So you end up being in I guess, a caution state in terms of the enemy. And, you know, you can hear them running around above you, even though they can't get in, and there's no way they could spawn down there. Which, thank goodness, because man, the barracks, oof, that's a rough place, man. It's dark. Now, I actually took this game off once I platinumed it, but I have spoken to my nephew recently, and he told me some of the new things have been added in. So I may re-download it to try some of that stuff out. The '80s theme, the '80s theme is always going to be a win for me. And you have to understand, I was born in the '80s, and so from a nostalgia standpoint, I have a lot of memories of the movies and even the commercials, the toys. Have a very special place in my heart. So when this game came out and I realized the years in which it took place, I was already drawn to it. And then when you look at some of the technology that's available, just in the homes, and it's just cool. I really like that. That's another big reason why I am a huge fan of Ready Player One, the book. Is because it tailored to the '80s themes very heavily. Not so much in the movie, but yeah, just another reason why I love that particular book. So maybe we'll talk about that in another video if that's something you guys want to hear. Feel free to comment below if that's something you might want to watch, and I will gladly make that video. Anyway, let's see. Yeah, '80s theme. So yeah, I was completely sold with that. I like being able to edit my character, though the more you progress through the game, it makes more sense to protect your character with the custom clothes and armor. You essentially end up looking like a road warrior character. But it helps, you know, I like building lore in games, which is why I've had a hard time changing the weapons in Fallout 4 to modern weapons. I see that, and I just can't get with it because I try to stick as close as I possibly can. So if it's like a World War One, World War Two weapon, then I would bring it in. But if it's beyond that, like more modern times, like an M4 or something like that, then I tend to avoid bringing that into Fallout 4 because it's lore breaking for me personally. I understand everybody's going to play that game their own way, and I'm totally getting sidetracked with this point, but I'm just saying, like, that's why I appreciate this game so much, because when you take down bigger enemies, you know, you get things that are really interesting as far as, you know, you get a powerful weapon but the more you get a powerful weapon, but the more you use it, it could ultimately hurt you. And I think that's kind of cool that, you know, there's an adverse effect to some of the things that you attain while progressing through the main plot of the game, and while also capitalizing on taking down bigger enemies, which, man, after a while, yes, rival hunting is a blast, especially if you're doing a multiplayer or a co-op session. man, just running around, um, using your spawn points, acquiring a ton of uh, relays so that you can spawn in those locations. And the one thing I had trouble getting my nephew to understand is like, we can't keep attacking the whole time. We do kind of have to scavenge for the ammo. After a while, you run out, and you gotta find ways to get more. So, he'd get sidetracked, but that's okay because he's young, so no worries there. But scavenging is extremely important. Though I think, yeah, by adding a couple of mods, you can increase your chances of getting ammo as well. Which maybe if I do another run of this game, that's a mod I'll maybe add. And this is from PCGamesN.com. Came out a month ago by Ian Boudreau. I'm just reading slow, a little bit from his article about the game. So, Dark Skies is named for a new enemy. It's the Soviet Firebird, which I was not aware until my nephew told me like a month ago. And I thought that was pretty cool. It's the first enemy that can actually fight back. This is fearsome machine that can be armed with autocannons, howitzers, Tesla coil spikes, and trip bombs. So I'm not gonna get into watching the video or anything like that. I just wanted to just go over just the main parts that what I was talking about. Which the world of Generation Zero has been one that persists. After your first character, any games you begin will take place in that world, with quests, with the first character being completely completed. The patch adds a new option to start a fresh new world, so you can play through the campaign from start once again. Now, the only reason I could think of doing this is if I wanted to redo a multiplayer with someone who's never played the game before, or I mean, if I just so happened, man, that game is a grind, and it's not worth the grind. It's just, man, I've already platinumed it. You know what I mean? Like, I have yet to download the other two DLCs, so if anything, the only reason that I could think of restarting the game is the fact that it already has the Soviet machines added to it as well. So that would make for a more interesting interaction between you, the original enemy bots, and then the Soviet bots. So there'd be more skirmishes, which is what actually helped me finish the game. Was the Soviet machines were distractions, so that I could kind of traverse certain areas without having to necessarily worry about dealing too much damage. They could fight amongst themselves, and I could just pick off, whatever was still alive after that, if I so chose, which I usually did, just to get points and stuff like that, because, planning the game meant that I had to do certain things anyway, so it's totally worth it. But if they also updated the trophies, then I might look into it, because I would be willing to play it again if my nephew wanted to, I guess. I'm just saying that particular option is not for me. But under certain circumstances, yes, I think I'd be willing to do that. So to each his own. I still think it's a good update, so I don't want to speak negatively on behalf of that. It's just not the one that I am concerned about. So, yeah. I'm extremely interested in traversing the same landscape with a dirt bike, and then that'll make me question what kind of weapon setup I'll have for the game, and like things I'm willing to carry with me. You get accustomed to having certain things, but then it really comes down to is you deplete your ammo very quickly depending on what it is you're shooting at. Though one thing I feel like, even though the player isn't at the highest level, if you can set yourself up right, eventually you get to a point where the prototype enemies are nothing. Like you just blast right through them, and your bigger challenges are on the regions that are outside of the start point, essentially, of the game. Outside of the start point of the game itself, like the initial start point. So just on that main island there, is mostly prototypes, and they're like they are a challenge early in the game, until you get used to just basically respawning, coming back, attacking again. I would say that I would change the way that some of the weapon drops come up in the game early on. I try to avoid any type of walkthrough that allowed me to acquire something too early. I was totally fine with just kind of scavenging and hoping that I'd find something that way, in which with updates that became a lot more reasonable. And I still think that I still believe that there are instances where that could be improved upon, like ensuring that there's a better weapon setup inside of bunkers, in terms of like just certain pickups. Like, I don't know, there was times where the things on the map were telling you what weapons were in a certain area were cool, but my gosh, it's like sometimes you'd be grateful to spawn in an area or you'd be grateful to end up in an area where the enemies don't respawn, trying to find one particular thing. Personally, I have no issues with the way that the progression system is set up in the game. I wholeheartedly appreciate the setup, and I think that the reward system is totally worth the effort. I think I already have this recording. Like, this is a modified version of what I had. I will say that it was very interesting figuring out the melee attack patterns for a hunter, being able to attempt close combat attacks, with stronger weapons. It's amazing, though. The splash damage is one thing I don't particularly like about that. I don't agree the fact that it deals so much damage simply because it slammed into the ground behind you. I mean, I could maybe agree with some form of blowback, or you know a force that pushes the player forward because of a good dodge on the player side, I'll say. But I don't think that it should deal nearly as much splash damage as it does. I truly believe, or you have to be good at leading the target in this game, because the runners move so rapidly, and it does get kind of annoying at first. You get used to their moving patterns, and they do stop in order to fire, and I think that just is a stability thing, so it does help. The other issue I have with spawning is there will be times where you're inside of a barn and they will happen to spawn inside of there, simply from, I think, from, it's a height thing as well. Like, if the height restrictions, which could be a bug in the game, allow it, then it'll just let it happen. So that's yet another situation where it's a question of, should they be able to eventually shoot down the doors so that the player has to either build it back, which would be a cool feature considering that I don't care for the base building thing. It's just not something I really wanted to do. I was okay with running around the game as is. I also don't care much for the base building setup of Fallout 4. So, it's just kind of just something I'd rather just be inside the world and just kind of experience that and not have to be so hands-on in terms of, controlling the integrity of assets within the game, like buildings and stuff like that. Like, if the game already has it to where the churches and the houses and everything else can't be destroyed, then I don't want to, that's just my take on it. But, like I said, a lot of people like that feature, so I'm not trying to take away from that. I'm just saying that it's not for me. So I guess that's two features that I don't really care for. Here's my issue, and it's not necessarily the game's fault, or the designer's fault. I appreciate the prefab way that all the houses are set up. I do miss aspects of old school Battlefield where you can destroy houses and buildings, I think that would be a more plausible scenario for this particular kind of game to be inside of a structure that could ultimately just be destroyed. The problem with that is then you would have to talk about a finite amount of ammo per enemy, especially tanks, and it seems like they have an infinite amount um, inside, which is kind of slightly unrealistic, but that's okay because it's a game. But I just feel like it would entice the player to leave some structures quickly in order to minimize damage, and ultimately you end up trapped inside of. And I got sidetracked. I didn't even talk about the spawn thing, but ultimately you end up getting trapped inside of the house, and they're lobbing rockets at it and heavy ammo, and so you're essentially just trying to stay out of an area where you're getting hit. And the reason why I say this is because the game has a way of spawning enemies inside of houses, which at first used to scare the crap out of me, and I really hated it. You know, and it was kind of comical at the same time because, you know, you'd be upstairs and a hunter will spawn in the living room, and all you see is its gun and part of its head popping through the floor. I don't necessarily always have a problem with the runners spawning in the houses, but the problem is sometimes you'll be standing there and you'll look over and they're just there. There's this particular glitch where if the runner does a dash attack at the wall, it'll basically clip through the wall into the house, and I'm okay with that. I'm not saying from a physics point that it makes sense, but from a gaming physics point, it does make sense because that's just, you know, physics inside games can be broken. My issue with that is that if it had more of a Battlefield system to it, then we're talking about the integrity of the house being a structural issue, which would mean that stealth would be all the more important. You know, so let's say if the enemies wouldn't necessarily be able to spawn in the house unless they did damage to the house to the point where then they could enter it through a hole. But just them spawning inside of it doesn't make any sense. The ticks do, even though they have a weird jump rate that has no real direction. But I mean, I'm guessing if they're not trying to attack, then they're just walking around, which is fine. But it just, as far as the runners and the hunters go, there's just a weird gray area where it could make sense. I mean, because I mean, a harvester or a tank would just destroy a house, which is yet another problem because, you know, like so it's kind of important because the houses then become like safe zones, even though you're being attacked. So I don't know. It's just kind of a weird, I don't know, love-hate relationship with how it's set up, and it has a lot to do with how the game allows them to spawn in. If that weren't the case, then there'd have to be some kind of counter for them not being able to enter on an, I guess, accidental spawn way. I don't know if the developers are just allowing it to go on just because, you know, it adds another layer, and that's fine, you know, just without them having to enter the house. But I just think them, at least, or at minimum, if the runners could bust down the doors, then that would be fine. But, you know, that would also mean that you'd have to, you know, shut plenty of doors, which actually would be cool because then you could kind of set up traps or whatever to prevent them. But man, that'd be a whole other style of gameplay that would be terrifying. Oh my God, dude. Just thinking about that. Ooh, think about that. But still, the hunters should not be allowed to spawn inside the houses. It just makes zero sense. From a tactical standpoint, I think they do a pretty good job at shooting the gas thingies at the house and essentially choking the player out from a certain area of the home, and then they have to move to another area or something like that. So just, yeah, it should just be ticks and runners that can enter the home, but the runners should be only able to enter under exclusive circumstances, like a dash attack at the door, which would be fine. It would definitely let the player know they're in the house, and then from then the other runners could just, you know, if that one runner could enter the door, possibly. It depends on how the house is set up. So if they're not able to do a dash attack, you know, because sometimes you'll enter a home that has a little entryway that blocks outside. And so in those kind of homes, obviously the player won't, or the runner won't be able to perform a dash attack for that. But let's say it's like a back door or the front door that is exposed to the outside, then yeah, the dash attack could work as a tactical standpoint. Because then you have to wonder, if okay, obviously a lot of these people fled, but occasionally you'll come across homes where there are people who are, who've been taken out by the uh, enemy bots in the game long before you got there, of course. And there's visual evidence of how it all went down, and so it's just like we could recreate that in order to make them tactically trying to get to the player make more sense. You essentially just end up inside of a fortified, non-destructible home, and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. It's actually very helpful in surviving the game, especially if you're by yourself and you're not tanking your way through every scenario, which I don't think one should. That's kind of the whole point of like importance of stealth. It helps you save ammo, among other things. Not always getting attacked by the biggest enemies, but they will chase you as long as they have to, and that's eventually it comes to a point where you're gonna have to turn around and fight back. So yeah, I do like how they're relentless in that way, and that kind of goes into what I was saying before about the seeker just inside the house. Yeah, it just makes zero sense to me for it to spawn there, and it breaks the lower, it breaks the immersion of the game. Like if there are no doors open in the house, how are they getting in? It's just kind of a silly side effect of the spawn setup, and I understand that by leaving it in, it makes the game a little more interesting. But it's just from an immersion sense, which I'm going to continue to stress that it just doesn't work for me. I just think that there should be countermeasures to make it seem a little more realistic to what's going on and why the people were so fearful and wanted to flee their homes, because basically they realized that the integrity of their homes, it was not safe. So of course, I could see a combat scenario where if the seeker has the capability to take down the front door and the house is open as it is, then if they can at least get on the main level. I'm not so sure about. I don't necessarily care about the stairs. That would make the game real. Oh my gosh, that would make it very interesting. The player would have to get a lot more tactical about everything. Everything. Yeah, they'd be coming in and take you out. And oh my, yeah, but and then there would be bunching, which is good. You could probably hunker down and try to figure out how to take them out that way too. So there are definitely some benefits to what I'm talking about. Ammo being minimized to just handgun stuff really sucks. But you end up in that scenario from time to time, which is why playing multiplayer is a lot more efficient in terms of at least getting a broader experience. And I hope that it would be. How would I change that? Okay, so one thing I would change about the multiplayer setup is perhaps have it matchmaking based, so you have people in a similar level to each other so that they can progress through the game. But also I would feature a suggested progression, with the option to do the side quests so that everybody could opt in whether or not they wanted to do the side quests or the main story. And I hope that that wouldn't create any type of disruption if somebody wanted to do it and the other two people didn't. But maybe that would be a way for the players to split off and maybe rematch with somebody who is, there's a way to make that work. But I think that would be a better way. The whole backing out thing, I just think is a bit rude, but I know that people have their reasons for that. But either way, it was just kind of my first experience, and I was hoping for more of a multiplayer kind of run. And I do like the fact that Fallout 76 caters to that. So you can choose to jump in, and there are also benefits, depending on what the person who is creating that team setup wants to offer, whether it be XP or I don't know what other features, but you get what I'm saying. So I just think that a reevaluation from many of these multiplayer or massively multiplayer RPG type games should consider is looking into creating a co-op togetherness experience, but also, if one wants to go the lone wolf route, that's totally fine. I just think it should be a lot easier to matchmake with people and just try to make it work. I do like the way that the pickups work in the game as well. So everybody can just pick up whatever it is they see, which is something that 76 really should change because, I mean, like, there's just some people that will be on your team, and I'm not trying to name any names right now. I love all my friends, but my brother would know whom I'm talking about. But sometimes, there's some players out there that will, run up to scavenge off of a downed enemy, and they'll just like deplete all the whatever it is there, and just like, dude, like, slow down. There's like four of us here, like, we're all a team. Hold on, like, I get it, but you're not playing by yourself right now. So I don't know. Yeah, I would change that about 76 for sure, which is yet another thing. If that's something you guys wanted to hear me talk about, then that's yet another video. So like I said, I'm willing to talk about a lot of stuff. I have a lot of things to go over, which was a big part of why I made this channel, so that in addition to tutorials, I could give my angle on what I think of a vast number of things in terms of gaming and technology, and where we were when I was a kid versus where we are now, and just kind of my ideas on certain things that have taken place. So, and where we could be in the future. So, it's very important. So things that, based on things that have taken place and where we can be in the future. So I just want that to be a good topic of discussion for this channel. And if that's something you all are interested in, please let me know. I'm totally willing to go all in on that, and we can have some really good conversations on behalf of games and technology. And I'll also try to come up with some cool different ways to view and do my commentaries on behalf of these things. So I just hope that you found it entertaining, and looking at all these glitches that I came up with, or that I found over time. Of course, many of them have been updated out. So it was just kind of things that I would come across as the updates would start to roll in. And I have no content involving the Soviet machines. I don't even recall recording anything. If you guys want to see a part 2 of this, we'll feature the Soviet machines, and including the new enemy character and the dirt bikes and all that. I have a very exclusive way I'd like to get around the world, and it's going to be a blast using that dirt bike. Like, it'll be fun. So, yeah. Feel free to comment below, like, and subscribe. I, again, hope you enjoyed the video. And as always, thanks for watching.